Welcome to Season 3, Episode 3 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to share some thoughts on how to support students who don't take ownership of their learning. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the transcript, links to recommended resources, and share your thoughts on the show. So you know the exact problem that I'm talking about this week. You're patiently showing a student how to solve a problem or figure out a process, and the student responds by saying, "Can't you just tell me the answer?" Or you're responding to a student's question with questions of your own to try to prompt him or her to figure out a solution independently, and the child says, "Can't you just tell me what to do?" When kids are unmotivated like this, the solution seems pretty natural. You give them more ownership, right? In traditional schools, that might be something like a homework menu where students have a choice about what type of assignment to complete, or other small ways in which kids get to make decisions about their learning. In more progressive schools, we're seeing an increased focus on project-based learning, Genius Hour, we're seeing 20% time, maker spaces, passion projects, all these wonderful opportunities for students to take charge of their own learning. These approaches are all designed to make learning more authentic and to empower kids to decide what they want to learn about, determine how to learn about it, and choose how they'll demonstrate their learning. Theoretically, it sounds like the solution. If you make the learning meaningful, kids will be naturally engaged. They'll jump at the opportunity to take ownership. If your students don't want to do the work or they aren't doing high quality work, the problem is that you're doubting your students and you just need to believe in them a little bit more. And you should try entrusting your students with more freedom. But the reality of what I'm hearing from teachers and from what I'm seeing myself in schools doesn't quite match that. Even for those of us who believe deeply in helping kids uncover their passions and ask and pursue answering their own questions, the implementation of these principles has been a bumpy ride for many of us. It can be tough to get the kids on board with student-directed learning. And in fact, giving kids more freedom when they're struggling with the freedom they already have is often the worst thing you can do. Can we get real about the fact that project-based learning and student-directed learning requires a lot of work, not only for teachers, but for kids? And kids don't always want to do that work. And they don't always have the skills needed to be successful at that work. If you see that students are resistant to or unsuccessful at directing their own learning, in my opinion, the last thing you should do is throw even more projects at them. I think we need to back up and consider that it takes an incredible amount of drive and focus and higher level thinking skills for a child to design and carry out a project or participate in Genius Hour or 20% time. Many of our students are so used to being spoon-fed the answers or only asked to do simpler rote memory tasks. Transitioning from fill-in-the-blank worksheets completed as a class to project-based learning is very daunting for many kids. Often we're expecting students to transition seamlessly between the two learning styles. 1 minute, we're cramming multiple-choice test prep down their throats, and then the next, we're asking them to design a project to showcase their research. These tasks require two completely different skill sets, and they foster two completely different attitudes toward learning. It can be very jarring for students when they're expected to seamlessly shift between those two approaches. And if the student is working below grade level, this is all the more true. Simple multiple choice questions feel difficult to them. Imagine how impossible and frustrating designing a project must be. So what are the solutions here? We can't return to our old teacher-centric ways of doing school. We have to support students in being independent and self-motivated. So how do we get kids to go from saying, "Just tell me what to do," to truly taking ownership of their learning? Here are 6 strategies for you to consider. The first is to explicitly teach and practice the skills needed for student-directed learning. Kids need to be taught how to manage their time. We have to teach them how to persevere when things get hard. What do you do when your plan isn't working? How do you problem solve? How do you organize your thoughts? How do you organize your materials? All of these things need to be explicitly taught to kids. So we have to pay attention to where kids are hitting the proverbial brick wall and then develop mini lessons to reinforce those kinds of skills. Don't waste your energy bemoaning how students should already have these life skills. Be prepared to teach to the students you actually have, not the students you wish you had. Be prepared to support them in developing these higher level thinking abilities. Secondly, you can give students more choice in the little things so they know how to make decisions about big things. We can't micromanage our students for one set of tasks and then step back and expect them to work independently on another. We have to allow students freedom in the smaller tasks too. When they're asked to do things in a very precise way, like bubbling in standardized tests, we need to acknowledge the mindset shift that is required of our kids in this situation. So start by giving kids more choice, maybe just in your classroom routines. Choosing where to sit for a project, choosing which assignment to complete first, and those sorts of things. Ask yourself Alan November's famous question: what am I doing in my classroom right now that I could theoretically turn over to students to do themselves? Give students more choice in little things so they know how to make decisions about big things. Thirdly, give additional structure to the kids who need it. Some kids thrive under open-ended directions, but others are terrified of making a mistake, or they have no idea what to do next. Give kids in that latter group a little more support. Help them create a checklist of steps, or provide them a partner that they can check in with if they feel like they're losing their way. It's okay to provide more guidance than you'd like for certain kids who need it. Scaffold their learning and slowly increase their capacity so that with each successive project, they're able to be more independent. Fourthly, explore topics that you're not the expert in and questions that you don't know the answer to. Kids get frustrated and they beg us to tell them the answers because they know we already know. They see there's a clear right answer that we're dangling over their heads and saying, just a little higher, come on, you can do it, you can do it. How frustrating that is for kids. No wonder they just want us to make that answer a little easier for them to reach. But what if we sometimes explored questions together? What if we said to our kids, I don't know the answer to that. How do you think we can find out? Show kids that we are all learners and model for them how to pursue answers. Similarly, you can pose essential questions which have no right or wrong answer. In addition to the basic recall questions, there must be some greater overarching question that compels kids to dig more deeply. What is the capital of our state? Is important to know. I mean, come on, you don't always want to be Googling basic facts, right? But there are bigger questions that are truly worth answering too. Things like, how does geography affect destiny? How would your life be different if you were born in the state capital instead of in our small town? See, these are questions that students can't beg you to reveal the answer to because each person has to uncover the answer for himself or herself. The responses will be unique to each individual, and that takes some of the pressure off of kids, and it makes the question more compelling. Lastly, help kids design the learning outcome. Often students resist creating their own projects or directing their own learning because they know that the teacher already has a set goal in mind. Whether we state it outright or we try to pretend that kids are in control, they know we have already envisioned what an A+ project will look like. And it's overwhelming and frustrating for them to try to play this guessing game of not only trying to meet that expectation, but to also design the learning process to get them there. So try creating the outcome together. Ask them, how will we know whether you've achieved your goal? What would it look like to show mastery of this topic? How should we assess your learning? What criteria should go into the rubric? And then if students try to get you to take over their project or keep asking you, is this right? Is this right? You can say, well, this is something that you designed. You determined what the outcome would be. So that means you're capable of determining if you're on the right path. Let's look at the rubric that you created and see how we can get you to the top level. So I hope these 6 ideas are helpful for you as you support students in taking ownership of their own learning. The takeaway truth that I want you to remember this week is from Alexandra K. Trenfor, who said, "The best teachers are the ones who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see." Thanks for listening. Have a fantastic week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. Truth for Teachers is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more great podcast recommendations, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. That's edupodcastnetwork.com.